Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Around the Emirates podcast with Sara Mousa, where I speak to guests from across the UAE about topics you want to hear about. Today, I have the absolute pleasure of being joined by Natalie. Hi, Natalie.
Hi, Sarah. Lovely to be on your show.
Lovely to have you here. So Natalie is a founder and CEO of Breeze Wellness, which is an organization that focuses on a lot of different ways for you to make yourself feel better inside and out, including yoga, coaching, sound therapy. What are all the things I've just said? Like, what is this? So many. So Natalie, I'd love to hear your story to understand kind of what made you become an entrepreneur and what brought you into kind of this wellness space.
Sure. So I guess the entrepreneurial spirit has always been with me from a very young girl, even from, holding fashion shows as a kid with my grandmother's clothes and just things that I thought always wanted to sort of, I guess I was always an ideas person, but then I never really sort of got the idea of making money from the ideas until later on in life. Basically, I got to the point where I'm a journalist. So I grew up in Australia, studied, went through to high school, realized I wanted to become a teacher in English, which is my passion. Writing is a passion of mine as well. And so was going down that path, and then the universe said, no, this is not for you. So I changed tacks and went down a different path, which was the journalism side of things. And I loved it. And I did it for about 15 years. But it just got to the stage, so I was a political advisor. So I was using my degree to actually advise politicians on how to handle the media, both in local government, state, and also in federal government, so across the whole spectrum. But I started to get to the point where I didn't believe what I was saying anymore. So the political game is a very interesting game, and it's about how you say certain things. And I guess it got to the point where the values and the policies of the party that I was representing were no longer aligned to my own. And I started to realize that very vividly. And it's funny because when you first get into work, I guess your focus is about, oh, wow, I'm starting to make an income, and I can put, I can maybe move out of mum and dad's house, put food on the table. And then all of a sudden, as you get older, those values started to change. And I wanted to work with an organization that was aligned to my values, because what I was starting to realize is that the values of the organization I was working for were not aligned with mine at all. And it became apparent because I started to speak out about the policies that the government were actually putting in place. I didn't agree with them. I'm a scuba diver as well. I'm a scuba diving instructor. And one of the policies that the government were introducing is a policy to kill sharks as a way of protecting beach users. And I was adamantly opposed to this. As a scuba diver, one of the most exciting things to see, if you're planning to see them, is sharks in the ocean, particularly when you understand the role that sharks play in keeping oceans healthy. And science was against this policy. It was a knee-jerk reaction of the government because there had been a whole range of shark bites in Western Australia. And so there started my entrepreneurial spirit, because it was all of a sudden, let's rally, let's like get people to raise their voices. And if the community there's enough of them raising the voice, hopefully we can overturn this policy. And so everything that I had started to do for the past 15 years in terms of advising politicians how to handle media, I started to implement myself against the policy itself. And so I ended up losing my job because it was no longer tenable, because I was speaking out against the policies they were bringing in. And I didn't care anymore. I was just like, no, this is so wrong in my eyes that I'm prepared to lose my job for it. Hence the entrepreneurial spirit that came out as a result of that. So, okay, if I can't do it this way, what way can I do it? And I started a not-for-profit, and thousands of people joined this campaign against this policy, and we ended up overturning it. So we were successful. Yes, I know, and like it goes down in history. It's still in the museums of Western Australia. In regards to the shortest campaign, because it only took about 9 months. Most campaigns to change, overturn policies take years, and so and some of the most amount of applications into the Environment Protection Authority to overturn this policy as well. So there was a huge groundswell. I didn't do it on my own. So I'm not a self-made person, definitely. I had teams of people to help us do that. And this is some of the getting into the deeper parts of entrepreneurship, is starting to realize that it had gone to its end. There was no point in me. It was no longer serving me anymore. So we won, and I started to take the process over to the other states of Australia. But something in me, it had lost its shine, and it got to the end of its tether for me. I had started to realize that, I don't know if I want to continue doing this anymore. And this is a turning point, and it's happened to me a few times now on my entrepreneurial path, where I go, okay, it's run its course, and there's no point trying to whip a dying business. In my eyes, even though some people may see it differently, I had already lost its passion. And at that time, I had been married. I got married, and my husband got a job in the UAE, and we started up a similar campaign called ASRAC in the UAE. And I was excited because it was all the challenges of getting a not-for-profit built up as an expat in a country that I was not very familiar with, and I needed to understand the laws and the processes. And I like that sort of research side of things. And then again, ASRAC ran its course, and I needed to come back to me. I had been so focused on the animals and protecting animals and protecting the environment, and I started to realize that I was hiding all of a couple of smaller issues that happened in my past in the work that I was doing. I was keeping myself busy so I didn't face these things, and it was showing up in things like anxiety, in things like panic attacks. And they were sometimes for weeks at a time, and I was no longer able to do the work that I was doing. And during one of these attacks, or after one of these panic attacks, I ended up saying, okay, I need to stop. There's a cycle, and it's happening too regularly for me, that I need to stop and I need to walk away. And Breeds Wellness came out of me going back to those journeys of, and I'm happy to now talk about them. Being sexually abused when I was 22 in Australia, which I did not tell anyone for until about 2 years ago. And that was my husband that I first told 2 years ago. And the other one was undergoing 8 failed IVF attempts. And the grief that I had tried to deal with, but not successfully, by keeping myself busy and making sure that I was, either thinking of starting a new entrepreneurial business or getting involved in something else. And for 6 months, I put a stop on everything. And then the entrepreneurial spirit kept saying, you need to do something with this. And hence Breathe Wellness was born. So once you have this, a very good friend of mine says you cannot be contained. You cannot be contained. Even though you go through setbacks, this spirit that you have, a personality trait that you have, it may be quiet for a little bit, but if that's your personality trait, it will always shine through. You cannot be contained. And so Breeze Wellness is now up and running, and I help people inside and out have a state of harmony, as opposed to any type of adversity they might be feeling or going through.
You've answered all my questions. Episode is done. See you later. Oh my Lord. Okay. Firstly, I want to thank you for being so candid. I really respect and am inspired by how honest you've been and how transparent you've been so far. I think it's fantastic that you were able to kind of share those experiences that you've gone through and are able to turn it into a positive situation and pass on that positive message to the listeners. So you've clearly literally done everything possible in humanity. Let's talk about Breeds Wellness a little bit more. So I understand that you felt like you were kind of going through that cycle. You needed everything to stop, and then you decided, okay, I want to do something that helps people more often. Can you kind of break down the components of Breeds Wellness for me? I know there's like therapy, there's coaching. Kind of what does it look like?
Sure. So I started with the writing to begin with. So I started to change the writing from being, I am a journalist by qualification. So I was writing a lot on sustainability,
Mhm.
and people would always contact me as an expert in that space, and I was comfortable with that. But then I started to say, no, actually don't want to talk about this anymore. I actually feel like my expertise is, and what I do want to raise the voice of, is talking about trauma. Because I didn't realize it at the time, but I actually was going through post-traumatic stress disorder, which was why I was going through the things that I was going through as a result of the sexual abuse, which I had put my head in the sand so deep that I didn't even think about it for many, many, many years. Even when I was going through therapy for grief counseling for the IVF, and I didn't even think about what had happened when I was younger. And so I feel as though this is what I really want to raise the voice of. I feel like there's still space to talk about these things in a way that hopefully resonates, because you look at the Me Too movement, and there's so many people who have gone through adversity at the hands of others. And I know I'm not the only one not speaking about it. And if you're not speaking about it, then what is it doing to your body? And I know, I myself know this so innately, that I basically just said, okay, this is what I want to talk about. So now I write it in this space. So that's where I first started. I then, as part of my healing process in that 6 months that I took off between leaving ASRAC and starting Breathe Wellness, got really involved in yoga. And it became something that just was natural for me. And my yoga teacher at the time said, if you can help us with some writing, I will actually allow you to go undertake the teaching at a discounted rate. And I didn't want to become a teacher. I just wanted to understand more about the philosophy and the science behind yoga. But part of the training is to actually teach. And so I got up there, and I didn't enjoy it. And even still, there was an opportunity to teach at the studio that my teacher was actually ran. And I did 5 sessions there. And by the 4th session, I just knew that this was a path that I felt was another way of helping people in this space. So I know for me, with yoga, we carry, and there's some science on this, we carry emotions sometimes very guardedly. So you can find your chest, your shoulders are actually drawn inwards when you're wanting to protect your heart. Like if you see someone who's sad, you're usually, the shoulders are in. We can carry emotions in our hips. And when we're asking to open up that space, it can actually let go of some emotions. And it can result, it did for me, in tears. I had tears, and talking about trauma that I had gone through is still in my body, and it was being released through yoga. And so I was writing about this as well, and I was like, there's got to be an area that I can work in this space too. So I started down this process, hence the yoga teaching. The coaching came after as a result of the yoga teaching. Again, with the desire to help others, I felt as though I needed to get a qualification in order to make sure that I knew what I was talking about, not just relying on experience and having the science aspect. And then sound therapy came in as the last one, and that just is as a result of my own, again, yoga experience and the amazing resonation of the bowls, the Tibetan bowls, and how that brings a state of relaxation, stress management, peace. Yeah. So that I feel as though they all go hand in hand, and it's a nice little package now. And I'm always looking for other ways we can add onto it, but that's where we're at currently.
That is beautiful. I love how you take 4 things that people would think have like almost something to do with each other. Like I would not think that kind of journalism or writing could somehow be connected to like, sound healing, for example. So I love how you've kind of connected those dots. And I also love the fact that you are looking at ways to evolve it. You're not just kind of sitting there thinking, this is the business proposition, it stays this way. I love that I've personally never seen a business that has these components in one. That's incredible.
Yeah, well, who knows? I don't know if I've got it right or wrong, but I can let you know.
You're doing something right.
I'm still going through the newness of it all, and there's always evolution. I feel like evolution has to be part of every business. It's just a different way, perhaps, of it running for
100%.
now. Yeah.
Perfect. So we've kind of touched on your entrepreneurial journey. We've touched on kind of your business. Having gone through so many different experiences from, being almost like a politician almost to, journalist and everything, what would you say has been a kind of crazy or wild or just insane story that has happened to you?
So straight after being the media advisor and then getting involved in the sustainability side of things, I actually started a pet care business. That was my first really dip toe in the water in terms of I find these passions that I really love, and I'm like, how can I make money from this? And it's so like this one, and also trying to get away from the 9 to 5 grind. It's so not me, and I know it's not me, and so what do I do to get the roof over the head and make sure I've still got a bit of play money on the side to do my yoga? And so walking dogs seemed like it's such an easy thing to do. And when I started it was 2007 in Western Australia. It was a mining boom. We went through a mining boom where all of the main resources all went up north to help the mining industry. And here I was trying to pay people $20 an hour to walk people's dogs. So because I could not believe how quickly people heard about Paws Galore, which was the name of the entity that I started. And I started just by putting your little ads, written hand notes at milk bars.
So cute.
Take my number. And then I got into the whole marketing of it and everything. And it's the funny side of it, I mean, I didn't see it as being funny at the time, but I can laugh about it now, is that I couldn't get staff. And I could not get walk. I had so many people asking for me to assist with their dogs, and I wanted to. It's my first real time of being my own business and not having anybody else guide me or involved in what I was doing. Where with the No Shark Cuddle, the sustainability side, I had so many people assisting me with that campaign. Walking the dogs was all me. And I would spend nights where I could not sleep trying to figure out how I could manage all these dogs. And I've seen the shows where you've got 10 dogs and you've got one walker, and I'm like, how can I make that all happen, Rather than just spending my time on one dog for an hour, maybe I could try and do 10 at a time and everything. But me being me, and also very new to it, I couldn't say no to people, but I also didn't put enough boundaries around the business at the time. So I was driving half an hour to go and walk one dog for an hour. And then I'm like, again, the funny side of it is I'm sitting here in a ball of tears thinking, I'm not a success. I'm a failure, and I could not see throughout it all that how successful Paws Galore actually was. But because I couldn't fulfill the customer's needs, I kept saying to everybody, I'm a failure. My first business has been a failure. And I sold it as a result at about a quarter of the price of what it was worth. The identity, the website, everything, because I just could not fulfill the need. And I look back on those days and I kick myself because all I needed to do was actually put a boundary as to how far I would travel out. And I would have been able to manage it, but I could not think of that as the answer because I just didn't want to say no to people. When you first start out, you want people to call you and go, you don't want to say no. It's the first person that's called. Of course you're going to say yes. And so your standards are a little bit, they're shifting, right? And then consequently, I've had my first step in starting a new business again. And I've made sure I've put all the structure in place and I've got everything right. And it's taken 6 months or so before I've got my first client. And I'm sitting there going, maybe I should open up the boundaries. So it's always that balance of what's right, what feels good, and then the knowledge which comes from time, So yeah, I will never forget the person who was like, I'm such a failure. And everybody was trying to tell me, like my parents, my husband, no, don't you see this is a success?
Yeah.
No, can't manage it. So yeah.
Well, see, I have loved having you on this show today because you literally answer, like, the answers that you give, like, take like 3 or 4 of the next questions that come up. So you were the most efficient guest I've ever had, I must say. That is incredible. I mean, I have been talking to you like about 20 minutes, and I can officially say you have succeeded in every single venture that you've had just from hearing your voice, hearing your story about it. And one thing that I really love about it is that you haven't stopped with each business. You've kind of kept going. You've seen, like, you kind of identified a passion that you have, and you've been able to
Yes.
create that, turn that into something. And even if it does take 6 months to get your first client, I just admire your kind of perseverance. And you did mention kind of a little bit in the end about kind of how you were able to use your experience to build the next step. Do you have any final word of advice for listeners who are, similarly trying to start their own businesses?
Yeah, I think the first one is to trust the process. So if you've gone out on your own already, you obviously would have done some type of, I guess, review of or plan of what you would like to achieve,
Mm-hmm.
and your market, and know your difference. Know your niche, how you are different. So, for example, when it comes to my yoga teaching, I am not your standard yoga teacher. I don't look like your standard yoga
Clearly not.
teacher. And and so that in its way, some people would see me as a disadvantage, but I see it as a win, because I can actually speak to people that perhaps would not feel so comfortable speaking to someone who is your average yoga teacher, for example. And
Yeah.
so if you know your niche, then work with that, and trust the process. So that's a really big one. Patience is one of our biggest and best things, and our hardest things to actually to rely on. I know myself, I'm not a very patient person, but, like, if you've set things up and you know your audience, you know your niche, and you constantly are working on those things, just trust in that, and eventually it will actually fall into place. It's the universe. For me, I feel as though the universe gives us the opportunity when we're best able to handle it, and trust in that. So sometimes some things need some tweaking, and you may just basically, okay, I just need to tweak this, or I need to tweak that, or I need to say this in a different way. You're still saying the same thing, you're still saying true, and be authentic to yourself. Being authentic is such a big thing for me, because people can tap into, they can read when you're
They
not.
can tell.
And
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I feel as though if you're just authentically you, you're going to find the customers who resonate with who you are, rather than just, your average. I feel as though there's loyalty when you are authentically you, because that person will follow you for that, rather than just tap in because they feel as though, you might be able to give them something that they can get somewhere else, really. But if you are you, then the personalities start to bond, and you become, there's more loyalty as a result of that authenticity. And my
That's
last one
beautiful.
would probably be vulnerability. Brené Brown talks about this, and I remember, listening to one of her TED talks, and doing something else, like housework or something, and me just stopping in my tracks and going, oh, okay, this taps into things that I've not done, and I could be better at. And vulnerability, it's a hard one. I mean, I was brought up with brothers. I was brought up with a very yang focus, not so much tapping into the feminine side and the yin side. And so that competitive side of me is a natural trait.
Hmm.
But the vulnerability side is really what makes, is that it's aligned to that authenticity. And I remember, telling my husband for the first time about what had occurred to me when I was 22, and feeling as though that person who my perpetrator had taken my voice for so long, and I allowed him to do that. And so now it's time to take back my voice. And I feel as though just by being authentic, being vulnerable, that you're actually going to tap into people and resonate with people on a different level, on a deeper level, than if you're trying to come from a position of, like, on a perch, or just providing, lectures and things like that. Being
Yeah.
authentic, being vulnerable, and being trusting in the process, those are the 3 big ones that I would say.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much, Natalie, for taking the time to speak to me and sharing such strong words of advice. I'm sure my listeners and myself even learned so much throughout this interview, learned about all the things that you can kind of overcome. And I really appreciate you sharing your story with me today.
You're more than welcome. Thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you for everything. And we'll speak soon.
All right. Take care, Sara. Bye.